Hello and welcome to another Wolftime gaming video. Today we're going to be customizing some B-Wings for use in Fantasy Flight Games Star Wars Armada tabletop game. I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on these, but I really can't leave them as the plain plastic and need to get some paint on them to give me that fully immersive experience on the tabletop. As usual, before we get started, let's get the kettle on. Okay, so the first paint that we actually start with, and give it a decent base coat, is Dawnstone. It's like a dark, I say dark grey. It's not really a dark grey. It's quite a light grey, just to try and match what we see on screen, really. Which is sort of like I suppose a mid-tone grey. There was a few highlights, and we'll pick those out in a little while. Don't see a lot of these. Quite a strange-looking ship, I think. Very odd looking. We only really saw it in Return of the Jedi, though it has featured quite a bit in Star Wars Rebels and things as part of Phoenix Squadron. It's a great looking ship, but it's really strange. I suppose one thing that really makes it stick out is the location of the command pod just at the top there, with the engines in the center, and this sort of is on like a gyro. So as the ship moves around, the actual pilot can orientate the cockpit so it stays upright compared to the horizon, which I think is a bit of a strange design, really, because your ship could be flying all over the place and you're just in one place. I think it'd take quite a bit to actually get used to piloting these things. Though they are quite an interesting looking thing. They're very different to your X-wings and Y-wings and A-wing and things, so it's a little bit different. It's just nice to have them on the table, and they're quite effective in game, I've heard, so it should be quite good to get them on the tabletop. But me being me, I can't go with this creamy white plastic. I need to actually get some paint on them, so to get that fully immersive experience on the tabletop, really. The same as the other videos, and if you haven't already seen those, check them out. They're in the playlist, or check them out on the channel once you've watched this one, of course. One thing I've been asked quite a lot recently is what brushes I use. I mainly use the Army Painter range of brushes. They're really good quality, and they last a long time. There's a few ranges out there that are a lot cheaper, however they don't last very long at all, so you end up actually spending more money on brushes. Here I'm just using a standard Army Painter brush, and for the smaller details such as the black areas and the colour on the actual vessel that we'll get onto, obviously, I've used the Insane Detail brush that you can just pick up from Army Painter. They come in their standard set. It is quite cheap, really. But as I say, not the cheapest on the market at all, but you really do get what you're paying for with them. So yeah, make sure you try and pick something up like that, really, that's going to last you a little while anyway, especially when using these smaller ships, because a lot of the brushes can get quite frayed when painting anything quite small. One thing I really was reading up on just about the B-Wings is that essentially they've been built to take on capital ships, and they really did prove their worth at the Battle of Endor with the pilots from Blade Squadron using the group tactics to target Imperial Star Destroyers, so they worked quite well. However, a lot of the pilots apparently were complaining that they manoeuvred essentially like freighters, and they were a real struggle to maintain, but the weapon system on board actually made up for that. So it'll be quite interesting to see if this is represented on the table in games. Probably not so much really in Armada. Maybe in X-Wing it is represented a little more, but obviously I'm playing with Armada with the smaller vessels because I like capital ships, really. But like I say, I can't have these as a plain plastic on the tabletop. So the next paint we're going to use is a Corvus Black, and essentially I'm just trying to highlight around the engine intakes It's a darker area. It looks almost like a dark grey on just this image here. However, I wanted it to stand out a little bit more, so I went with black for that. You've also got 3 windows on the actual gyroscopic cockpit that I tried to pick out. And to do this, I used, as I said, the Insane Detail brush. It's got a very small bristles essentially, so you can just touch that black paint in the area. Don't try and get loads of black paint on your brush when you do this, because essentially it'll just go onto the grey areas. But if you do go on the grey areas, don't worry, because you can just pick out that grey paint after the black's dried and touch it up quite neatly. But as you can see, what I'm doing is literally just touching the areas with the black paint and drawing that paint into the recesses of the cockpit and the actual engine intakes. And it's really easy process to do, and looks quite effective at the end. You can already see they're looking a lot better than they do when they first come out of the box. For a little bit more added firepower on the tabletop, rather than using these, I'll probably want to go more for like an Arc 170. You don't really see the Rebellion using those, but on that note, we have seen teasers recently from FFG pointing out the fact that we're going to be moving towards the Clone Wars, which would be quite interesting to see, and it's definitely something I'll be heavily invested into, and hopefully we'll see some of the Arc 170s and things like that on the table soon. So the next paint we use is the squadron markings. For this, I've used like a light blue, which is a Calgar blue, Citadel Miniatures Calgar blue. And all I'm doing is picking out 2 areas just along the rear of the cockpit, as you can see in the image on the screen there, to try and match that. And a couple of areas on the wings, and then at the bottom towards the special weapon pod as well, just to really make them stand out on the table and have a little bit more colour on them, rather than being a plain sort of a grey colour. You don't need to go with the blue at all. You can use any colour you want. I mean, you can see that on the image on the screen there that it's not really a blue as such. It's more like a deep bluey grey that they've actually used, where I've gone quite light in comparison. Also, you'll note that what I did at this point was attach it to the stand just to help me hold them to paint. What you find when trying to hold something this small is they'll drop out your fingers and quite easily, and you won't be able to get that stability that you need really, where you want to rest your wrist on the table and actually get a decent grip on them. And with the miniatures, you're not really going to get that decent grip, but put them in the stand. Obviously you've got to be careful not to paint the actual stand, but using these type of brushes, just take your time, you should be okay. As I was saying, you can pretty much use any colours you want for these. I'm sure the Rebellion, you had plenty of different colours for them. They in the actual film, I think they were called Blade Squadron, as I've said, rather than a colour squadron like the X-Wing, so you could pretty much go mad with it really and do what you want. I think in Star Wars Rebels there's actually a prototype version of the B-Wing that's bright orange, and the whole thing's pretty much orange, and I did think about doing maybe a prototype squadron of those, but I decided against it in the end and went with just the colour scheme that you can see here, which is that Calgar blue, and I used a WAG flesh colour, which is actually a green skin and orc colour from Citadel Miniatures, but it's like a dark green that works really well actually, and really stands out quite nicely on the actual B-Wings, and make them look a little bit different. As you can see with this one as well, instead of doing the lines as I did with the blue, I painted the whole rear area of the cockpit just to be a little bit different. And instead of doing like a diagonal line at the bottom of the weapon pod, and I essentially just did around the bottom of the base next to the weapon pod, so there was a little bit of difference there. The next paint I used was Lead Belcher, and this is essentially a silver. You can use any silver paint you want just to pick out the sort of metal details around the engines. You can see what I'm doing here as well is painting the actual backs of the engines as well, where we'll put some colour on in a moment, but you want to get a complete covering on there so you haven't got any grey showing up. I also painted the weapons on all the vessels as well, which are on the 2 foils that come out the side of the vessel, and on the special weapons pod as well, just the little areas that extend forward. I painted those silver as well. They're actually not that colour on screen, they sort of match the rest of the vessel, but I wanted them to stand out a little bit more and add a little bit more detail, so I took a little bit of our artistic license here and just painted them all silver. With all the silver done on the models now, what you want to do is try and bring that colour down and add a little bit of shading. To do that I use Nuln Oil, which is essentially an oil paint from Games Workshop that it's so thin that it seeps into all the cracks and crevices on any of the models that you're painting, and you can see here straight away it sort of forms around all of those areas, all the sunken areas, giving you a natural shaded colour to them, and it also darkens down the grey a little bit as well. And you can bring that colour back up if you wanted to by using the Dawnstone over the top. I decided not to because I thought they looked quite good, grimy and dirty really, especially with them being Rebellion starships. I didn't want them looking too shiny. But it really does finish off the model, and what it does is blend all of the colours together and make them look really good and really effective on the tabletop. And like I say, you can use this for anything. I've actually used this on the capital ships as well that I've got, because what this does is drops into all the crevices on those as well, and adds that extra little bit of dimension to your vessel. You can see here what I did as well is just pop them into their flight stands as well, just so they're not leaning on the ground or on whatever you're painting them, because the oil's so thin it will tend to rub off on areas as well. So you want to try and leave them stood up somehow to try and make them dry off and get that effect that you want. You can see now that oil is all drained into the recesses and looks really good. Next up was the engines, and for this I went with the pink colour. I used the Screamer Pink to start with, which is another Citadel paint, and all you need to do is dot these on the actual 4 rear engines there. You could have gone with an orangey colour if you wanted to, like they did in the films. I wanted a pink colour, to be honest. I thought that stood out a lot more, and it looks a lot better on the table. To actually make it look like it's glowing a little bit more, I use a second pink colour, which is a colour called Pink Horror, and all you do is do another small dot in that centre of the engine, and it sort of highlights the centre of the engine itself, making it look like it's glowing. It gives it really good effect and looks really good on the table as well. And it stands out massively after you've done the oil too. If you put this on before you do the oil, you put the oil over the top, you'll lose that effect, and that glow will sort of disappear. You don't want that. You want them to stand out quite a lot. Thanks for watching, guys. I'm really pleased with how these turned out. I think they look absolutely fantastic. I think they're going to look really good on the tabletop as well. I've already mixed them into a few of my starships as well, took a few photos. I think they'll look absolutely amazing, and I really can't wait to get some games in with them. It's a really easy paint scheme with very little effort really. It's very minimal effort to be able to get them looking this good in comparison to the creamy white boring plastic that you get in the actual set when you pick it up. Make sure you hit that subscribe button to see any future videos, and I'll see you in the next one.